Welcome to Miss Retro Reads. We continue with Beau Geste, Chapter 7. After completing our preparations for the morrow, Michael and I strolled out to the courtyard. Within seconds, someone passed us in the dark, and then waited near the lantern by the quarter guard to identify us by its lights. It was Schwartz. "See here, you," he said, as we drew level. "What are you going to do if someone kills Lejeune without consulting your lordships?" "Nothing," replied Michael, as Schwartz followed us away from the light. "We shall continue as soldiers. We shall obey the orders of the senior person, remaining true to the flag. If you desert, you desert. But if we can prevent mutiny and murder, we shall." "Oh, you will you, Mr. Preacher?" replied Schwartz, evidently putting great restraint upon himself. "What I want to know is whether your cowardly gang is going to fight us." "Certainly, if ordered to." "And if there's no one to order you?" "Then obviously we shall not be ordered to. And we certainly shan't hinder your departure." Schwartz turned to go. "Look to yourselves, I warn you," he growled. "Look to yourselves." As we watched Schwartz disappear, Michael said, "They'll do it tonight. Let's have another word with Bolidar, and then we can fix a place of action." A search of the fort produced no sign of Bolidar, but we tracked him down in the barrack room. He was deep in conclave with Schwartz and his gang at the long table. Eventually, however, the party broke up and Bolidar was left sitting at a bench, polishing his bayonet. I went over to him and said, "Will you polish mine too?" And then as I gave it to him, I whispered, "Follow me outside." I strolled back to my cot, and taking my mug, went out as though for water. There in the darkness I watched the lighted doorway, and soon Bolidar came out. "Lejeune does not believe that the diamond is not here," he told me, as we huddled together. "The mutineers are going to shoot him and all the non-coms on morning parade tomorrow. They think he will be expecting it at night, and he'll be off guard. They're going to kill Dupré and Boldini simultaneously. If your party is a big one, they're going to leave you alone, if you leave them alone. Blanc, who has been a sailor, is going to lead them to Morocco by Lejeune's compass. They will court-martial Guantazio, the dirty traitor, and if he is found guilty, they will hang him." "And you?" I asked. "I am to shoot Lejeune, to prove my sincerity. If I don't, I am to be shot myself. Guantazio has been maligning me to Schwartz." "Have you told Lejeune this?" "I'm just going to do so now," he replied, and I gasped. "Then he'll arrest them tonight, probably, if he believes me." "But what if he doesn't?" At that the wretch had another nerve storm, and I had to quiet him down. "Look here," said I. "My brother and I will save you, provided you do nothing against us. We'll prevent the mutiny, and nobody will be killed." He clutched my hand, and I hoped I spoke the truth. As Bolidar slunk off, I went back to the barrack room, there asking my Arabic copy, the Koran, from the shelf above my bed. I seated myself beside Michael. I began to read in Arabic, as we often did, but between verses I passed on the news in the same language, as though still reading. Just as I was closing the book, Bolidar re-entered the room. "What about my bayonet, Bolidar?" I called. "Oh, half a minute, Smith." And he began polishing it, and then he brought it over, and he bent over my bed to hang the weapon on its hook and whispered, "I cannot find him." "We'll tell him tomorrow," and went back to his place. Under cover of the lights out bugle, I repeated this to Michael. "Then we shall have a quiet night," said he, and silence descended in the room as usual. Lying in my cot, I realized I could not share Michael's faith. What more likely than that Lejeune should choose tonight for his counterstroke? He could hardly continue to sit on the powder barrel when the fuse was light. I tried to put myself in Lejeune's place. What should I do if I were he? In such circumstances, if I wished first to save my life, and secondly to secure a gem reposing in the pouch of one of the two of three men upon whom I could depend in time of trouble. For hours I tossed and turned in my hot, uncomfortable bed, as the problem tossed and turned in my hot, uncomfortable brain. In desperation for sleep, I turned again, this time to facing the door, and there, in the doorway, stood Lejeune. He was quite alone, and as I looked from bed to bed, he held a revolver in his hand. Whom was he going to shoot? Without thinking, I raised myself on my elbow. He saw me at once, placing a finger to his lips. He beckoned to me. I started in amazement, frowning savagely. He beckoned again, with an imperious movement of his arm. Was he going to murder me outside? Was he going to tell me to fetch Michael out? As these thoughts flashed through my mind, I struggled into my trousers and tunic and tiptoed to the door. "Follow me," said Lejeune, and led the way to his quarters. Closing the door of his bare little room and seated himself at the table, he stared at me with an evil-tempered frown. "Do you and your memorable brother want to live?" he suddenly growled. "On the whole, I think so, mon adjutant," I replied. "On the whole you do," sneered Lejeune. "Well, you'd better listen carefully, for only I can save you. There's talk of a jewel your gang got away with in London. Also, there's a plot among those dogs in there to murder you both and steal it, and desert with it. Is that so, mon adjutant? Don't you answer me, you unspeakable corruption. I know all about it, as I know everything else that is done and said and even thought in this place. I don't care a curse what becomes of you and your brother, but I won't have plots and murders in any force under my command. Do you hear me, scared animal?" "I hear you, mon adjutant." "I am going to teach these curs to attend to their duty and leave diamonds and plots alone. To that end, I am going to detail you and your brother and a few more, say legionnaires, Saint-André, Corridor, and Maris, as a corporal's guard to arrest the ringleaders. You'll act at my orders, and you'll shoot down any man I tell you to shoot, as mutineering mad dogs should be shot. And to prevent any more disturbances, your brother will hand over the diamond to me. I'll put it in where no plot will trouble it. You and your cursed jewels. Wrecking discipline and causing trouble. You ought to be doing 20 years in jail, the pair of you. Do you hear me?" "I hear you, mon adjutant." "Shortly, you and your brother and the others will be given ammunition. You two brothers will be put over the magazine and will shoot anyone except myself who approaches it. I'll teach the swine to mutiny. I'll teach them. It was your brother I wanted, but you happened to be awake, and I saw no point in entering that cage of treacherous hyenas. So go back and wake your brothers, Saint-André, Maris, and Corridor, and tell them to get up quietly and come out with their rifles. I shall be at the door with my revolver, and I'll shoot anybody who makes a move I don't like. Now go." I saluted and turned about. So the hour had come. Lejeune was going to make us the executioners, and it was our duty to obey him. But Michael? What would happen when Michael denied any knowledge of a diamond? "Make a sound, and you'll be the first to die, the first of many, I hope," growled Lejeune, and I felt his revolver jab into the small of my back as I went down the passage. We reached the door of our barrack room, where Adjutant halted and his revolver raised. I crept to Michael's bed and whispered in his ear, "Beau, old chap, it's John. Don't make a noise." He woke up and was instantly alert. "Get dressed, take your rifle and bayonet and get out. Lejeune is relying on our party." He saw Lejeune in the doorway near the night lamp and got off his cot. I crept to the others, and by the time I had roused them, Michael was creeping from the room dressed, his rifle in his hand. I saw Lejeune give him some cartridges, and then I crept out, too, taking my rifle and bayonet. "Go outside and load," whispered Lejeune, giving me 10 cartridges. Then shoot any man that sets his foot on the floor. We charged our magazines and stood behind Lejeune in the doorway, rifles ready, while Saint Andre, Maris, and Corredar joined us. Not one of the sleepers stirred. Saint Andre and Corredar, remain here until relieved, Lejeune said. If any man wakes, cover him with your rifle, and say you'll shoot him if he leaves his bed. Do it at once. If he disobeys, fail, and I'll shoot you myself. Follow me, you others. And he quietly led us back to his quarters. Guard the door, he said to Maris, and shoot anybody who approaches. Then, ushering my brother and me into the room, and closing the door, he said, Give me the wretched diamond that is the cause of all this trouble. He glared at Michael. Out with it, you scurvy hound, unless you want your throat cut by those mad dogs who fixed your business for this morning at parade. Yes, I know all about it. Quick, I say. And he shook his fist. Michael stared in astonishment. Diamond? You try any trick with me, and I'll blow your filthy head off. He picked up his revolver from the table, where he had it laid. Give me that diamond. Do you think I'm going to have discipline spoiled by every cursed jewel thief that chooses to hide here with his swag? I have no diamond, mon adjutant, replied Michael quietly. As I could have told you, mon adjutant, I put in. My brother has never had a diamond in his life. Words failed Lejeune. I thought and hoped that he was going to have an epileptic fit. His red face went purple, and he drew back his lips, baring his teeth and causing his mustache to bristle. He raised and pointed the revolver, and I was about to bring up my rifle, but I knew he could shoot twice before I could even cover him. I was thankful that Michael and I had sufficient restraint to stand motionless at attention. I told myself that Lejeune needed us alive for the present. At any moment we might hear the rifles of Saint Andre and Corredar as the mutineers rushed them, or the mutineers might burst into the room to kill him. Yet he was a brave man. Situated as he was, his life hanging by a thread, he still attended to the business in hand. He turned his glare from Michael to me. Oh, you would talk, would you? He said in a sinister tone. Well, you haven't much more time for talking, just a little prayer, perhaps. And he turned his revolver from Michael's face to mine, and back again to Michael's. It was most unpleasant, the twitching finger of a homicidal maniac on the hair trigger of a loaded revolver a yard from one's face. He began to swear blasphemies horridly. Then, without thought, I did what would have been the bravest thing of my life if it had been done consciously. I defied Lejeune. Look here, Lejeune, I said coolly. Don't be a silly fool. In about 2 minutes you may be hanging on that wall with bayonets through your hands. We've got no diamond, and you've got 5 good men to fight for you. More's the pity. So stop gibbering about jewels, and be thankful that we know our duty if you don't. Very stout fellow, murmured my brother. Order of Michael for you, John. For a moment Lejeune just looked faint, and then with a howl he sprang toward me. But as he did so, Michael's left hand made a swoop, passing under Lejeune's hand, and swept the revolver to the floor. As it clattered to the ground, my bayonet was at Lejeune's throat, and my finger was on the trigger. Move, and I'll kill you, I hissed, feeling like a cinema star and a donkey at the same time. Michael picking up the revolver. So you are mutineers, you loyal lying swine, panted Lejeune, moving his head from side to side and drawing deep breaths as though choking. Not at all, said Michael. We're soldiers wishing to do our duty, not babble about diamonds. Man, don't you know this fort will be burned and the garrison gone and you dead in an hour's time unless you do your job while you've a chance? You'll do your duty all right, sneered Lejeune, and afterward, when I've filled your mouths full of salt and sand. Perhaps you'll prefer drops of water to diamonds. Perhaps it will not be I who jabber about jewels then, Your turn to jabber now, anyhow, Lejeune, said I wearily. But what about stopping this revolt? The man pulled himself together. Come with me, he said, with a certain dignity. Our real conversation is postponed until I have dealt with a few other unspeakables. Put that rifle down. I lowered my rifle and opened the door. Michael put the revolver on the table, and Lejeune took it up. Morris, on guard outside, looked at me inquiringly. Follow me, you three, Lejeune said. At the door of the barrack room stood Saint-André and Corridor. No one has moved, mon adjutant, reported Saint-André. Put down your rifles, said Lejeune to us three, and bring all arms out of this room, quickly and silent. You other two will shoot any man who leaves his bed. We set to work emptying the armed racks of the label rifles first, and then going from bed to bed and removing the bayonets from their hooks. A steel bayonet jabbered struck a tin mug, and a man sat up. It was Vogue. Cover him, said Lejeune, and the two rifles turned towards that startled man. Vogue fell back instantly and closed his eyes. On my last journey to the door, with a double armful of bayonets, one slipped and fell. As it did so, I shot out my foot. The bayonet struck it and made little noise, but my foot knocked against a cot, and its occupant sprang up, blinking. Himmel! What's that? It was Glock. Lie down, I whispered, nodding towards the door. Shoot him if he moves, said Lejeune. Glock lay down again, staring at Lejeune as might a hypnotized rabbit at a snake. In another minute there was not a weapon in the room, nor was there a sound, and none slept so deeply as Corporal Boldini, who was nearest the door. Lejeune took a key from his pocket. To the armory with the rifles, quick! You, Saint-André, mount guard. Send the key back to me with Corridor and Morris, and shoot anyone who approaches the place, other than one of these four. Now then, he continued to Michael and me, as the others crept off, laden with rifles, some of these swine are awake, so keep your eyes open. If several jump at once, shoot Schwartz and Brandt first. If only one moves, leave him to me. A faint lightening of the darkness outside the window showed that the false dawn was breaking. As I stared into the room, I found myself wondering what Lejeune would do next. What indeed should I do if he ordered me to open fire on unarmed men in their beds? What would Michael do? Private conscience said, sheer murder. But military conscience said, your duty is to obey your officer. The windows grew lighter. Morris and Corridor crept back, their work completed, and Morris gave Lejeune the key of the armory. Saint-André is guarding the magazine, mon adjutant, whispered as he saluted. Come with me, Smith, Lejeune said to me, and I'll disarm the guard and sentries. You other three remain here. Shoot instantly any man who puts his foot to the ground. He glared round the room. Ah, my little birds, you'd plot against me, your adjutant, Lejeune, would you, huh? I followed him down the passage. I'll clear the sentry off the roof first, he said, and then there'll be no shooting down on us when I disarm the guard. Leading the way, he went up the stairs that opened onto the flat roof, round which ran a thick, low wall, embrasured for rifle fire. After relieving the sentry on patrol, he posted me. He then took the man's rifle and ordered him to go down to the guard's room and ask Sergeant Dupre to come up to the roof. Now, he said to me, as the man went, come here. He pointed down into the courtyard to the open door of the guardroom. I shall order Sergeant Dupre to take the rifles of the guard and sentry, and then send one man out of the guard's house with the lot. Shoot anybody who comes through the doorway, if he does not have half a dozen rifles. Raising my rifle, I covered the door. I saw the relieved sentry cross the courtyard and enter the guard's room, and a moment later Sergeant Dupre came out. Watch, growled Lejeune. That sentry will talk, and they may make a rush. Nothing stirred. Sergeant Dupre came up to the roof and saluted. "I want the rifles of the guard and the sentry, Sergeant Dupre," said Lejeune. "Shoot any man who hesitates. Send one man, and only one, to me here, with the lot." Sergeant Dupre turned about and descended the stairs, crossed the courtyard, and took the rifle from the sentry at the gate. The man preceded him to the guard's room, and then he visited the other sentries, repeating the procedure. A minute after the sergeant's last visit to the guard's room, a man came out. I was relieved to see that he carried 3 or 4 rifles over each shoulder, the muzzles in his hands. "Watch," growled Lejeune. "They may all rush out together now. Open rapid fire if they do." And he also covered the doorway with the rifle he had taken from the sentry. The man with the rifles, one Grenouille, a big stupid Alsatian, came up the stairs. I did not look round, but kept my eyes fixed on the doorway through which a yellow light struggled with that of the dawn. Then I heard a crash behind me. I wheeled, expecting to see that man had felled Lejeune from behind. Grenouille had released the rifles with a crash, and was pointing, staring, his mouth wide open. So obviously was he stricken that Lejeune, instead of knocking him down, turned to look in the direction of his pointing hand. The oasis was swarming with Arabs. Even as we looked, a horde of camel riders swept out to the left, another to the right, to surround the fort. There were hundreds of them already in sight. Even by the poor light we could see. Lejeune showed his mettle instantly. "Back with those rifles! Send Sergeant Dupre, quick!" Then he snapped at me. "Down to the barrack room. Give the alarm. Take that key to Saint Andre, and issue the rifles. Send me the bugler. Jump, or I'll—" I jumped. Rushing down the stairs, I threw the key to Saint Andre, who was standing at the door of the magazine. "Arabs!" I yelled. "Out with the rifles and ammunition." Dashing on, I came to the barrack room. Michael was pointing his rifle at Boldini's head. Mars was covering Schwartz, and Corridor was waving his rifle over the room in general. Everybody was awake, and there was a kind of whispered babble. I halted, drew breath, then bawled, "Arabs!" To Michael and the other 2, I cried, "Up with you, we're surrounded!" Then I turned to dash back, conscious of a surge of unclad men clambering from their beds as their jailers rushed after me. Gleeful howls of to arms, pursued us as the men snatched at their clothes. Saint Andre staggered towards us beneath a huge bundle of rifles. Dupre and the guard were clattering up the stairs, and as we raced on to the roof, Lejeune roared, "Stand to! Rapid fire!" He ordered Dupre to take command of the roof, and then went below. Soon a trickle of men appeared. Men in shirt-sleeves, men bareheaded and barefooted, yet each had a full cartridge pouch, his rifle and bayonet. Within a few minutes everyone was on the roof, and from every embrasure rifles poured their fire upon the Arabs. It had been a very near thing. But for Grenouille, there would not have been a man alive in the place by now. Below, the plain was dotted with little heaps of white and blue clothing, looking more like scattered bundles of washing than dead men who, a minute before, had yelled ferociously for the blood of the infidel. Our bugler blew the ceasefire, and as I straightened myself up, I looked round. It was a strange sight. At every embrasure was a caricature of a soldier. At his feet a pile of spent cartridges, and in 1 or 2 instances a pool of blood. As I looked, one of them slowly sank to the ground, his head striking with a thud. He appeared to be dead. It was Blanc, the sailor. "No time yet for shirkers," shouted Lejeune, striding towards the man. He dragged him from the ground and jerked him heavily into the embrasure. There he poised the body, chest leaning on the upward-sloping parapet and elbows wedged against the edge of the. Lejeune placed the rifle on top of the embrasure, and the dead hand round the grip and a dead cheek against the butt. Continue to look useful, my friend, if you can't be useful. He jeered. Perhaps you'll see that route to Morocco if you stare hard enough. Then he called to Boldini. Corporal, take every third man below. Get them fed and dressed. Double back here if you hear a shot, or the assembly blown. If there's no attack, take half of the rest below, and then the remainder. Have all standing to again in 30 minutes. Saint-Andre Maris, more ammunition. 100 rounds per man. Cordidaire, water. Fill all the water flasks, and put filled pails above the gate. They may try a bonfire against it. Dupré, no wounded will go below. Are all prisoners out of the cells? He glared round. Where's the excellent Schwartz? Here, you dog. Up to the lookout platform, and watch those palm trees till the Arabs get you. You'll have a little while up there for thinking out more plots. He laid his hands on his revolver and scowled menacingly at the big German. Schwartz sprang up the ladder to the high platform that towered above the fort. It was the post of danger. Now use your eyes, all of you, bawled Lejeune. Shoot as soon as you see anything to shoot at. 10 minutes later, Boldini returned with the men he had taken below, all dressed as for morning parade. They took their places, and the corporal hurried round the roof, touching each alternate, ununiformed man on the shoulder and ordering him below. Soon they too were back. Now that they were fed, clothed, and reveling in fight, gone were all sights of cafard and mutiny. Michael and I went with the third batch, hoping to be back before anything happened, but not a shot broke the stillness as we hastily swallowed soup and tore at our bread. They'll never get in here without cannons, Michael murmured with bulging cheeks. What about a regular siege? I asked. Even if we kill a score of them to every one we lose, we should be too few men to man the walls eventually. Maybe we'll get relief from Tokotu. 100 miles away, I repeated, and no communication? Michael grinned. Chance for medal militaire, he said. Go to Lejeune and say, Fear not, alone I will walk through the encircling foe and bring you relief. Might be done at night, I think, said I. I don't think. These men will circle the place hand in hand, rather than let anyone slip through. Full moon, too. At that point, Boldini hounded us back to the roof, and we resumed our stations. All was ready, and the Arabs could come again as soon as they liked. Lejeune paced round like a tiger in a cage. Hi, you, he called up to Schwartz. See anything? Nothing moving, mon adjutant, replied Schwartz. A moment later he shouted something, and his voice was drowned in a sudden outbreak of rifle fire from round the fort. The Arabs had lined the sand hills, and lying flat below the crests, were pouring in a steady fire. This was different from their first mad rush, when they hoped to surprise a sleeping fort. They were now difficult to see, and a man firing from the embrasure was as much exposed as an Arab. As the morning wore on and the sun gained in power, I was increasingly conscious of the heat and of the severe headache I had. Opposite to me, about 100 yards distant, was a man who merely appeared as small black blob every few minutes. He only showed his head when he fired. He, among others, was potting at my embrasure, and with unpleasant frequency there was a sharp blow on the wall near me, and sometimes the high wail of a ricochet. Suddenly the man on my right leapt back, shouting, and fell to the ground, his rifle clattering at my feet. I turned and stooped over him. It was the wretched Guantazio, shot through the middle of his face. As I bent down, I was sent crashing against the wall. Lejeune, who had literally sprang at me. You turn from your place again, and I'll blow your head off. He picked up the moaning Guantazio and wedged him into the place from where he had fallen. Stay there, he shouted, or I'll pin you up with bayonets. Suddenly the Arab fire stopped, and our bugles sounded the ceasefire. "Stand easy," rang out Lejeune's voice. "Wounded, lie down where you are." Some half-dozen men sank to the ground in their own blood. I was thankful to see that Michael was not among them. Sergeant Dupre and Cortadar went to each in turn with bandages and stimulants. "Corporal Boldini," barked Lejeune, "take the men down in 3 batches for soup. Saint Andre, replenish ammunition." When my turn came to go down, I was more thankful for the comparative darkness and coolness of the caserne than for the soup and wine, even for my head was splitting. "A toast to death," said Cortadar, as he raised his mug of wine. "This place will be a grave shortly." "He's fey," said Michael. "Anyhow, better to die fighting than to be done in by Lejeune afterwards. If I go, I'd like to take that adjutant with me." "He's a topping soldier," I said. "Great," agreed Michael. "Yet I believe he's torn both ways when a man's hit. The brute says, 'That's one for you, mutineer,' and the soldier says, 'One more of this garrison gone.'" "He's a beast," I agreed. "He flung 2 wounded men back into their embrasures, and enjoyed doing it. Partly enjoyment and partly tactics. The Tuaregs have no field glasses, and to them a man in an embrasure is a man." "What about when there are too few to keep up volume of fire?" "He hopes for relief before then," put in Saint Andre, who had just joined us. "Dupre told me the wily beggars kept 2 gorms outside every night since he knew of the conspiracy. They have orders to go riding to Takatu and say the fort was attacked the moment they heard a rifle fired, inside or out." "Of course," I exclaimed. "It would look bad if he had to send for help to quell a mutiny, but he wouldn't mind a column arriving because a Gaume had erroneously reported an attack." "That's right. He save his face and he saves the fort too," said Cortador. "If a shot had been fired at the mutineers, the Gorms would have scuttled off, and the relief column would have found a heroic Lejeune guarding a gang of mutineers. As it is, they'll know tomorrow morning at Takatu that the place is invested, and they'll be here the next day. Question is, where shall we be by then?" Corridor smiled. "In eternity, dear friends." "Up with you," shouted Boldini, and we hurried back to our stations. The wounded were again in their places, 1 or 2 laying very still in them, others able to stand. On either side of me stood a dead man, his rifle projecting before him, his elbows keeping him in position. I could see no sign of life in the desert, nothing but sand and stone, over which danced the blazing heat haze. Suddenly there was a cry from Schwartz on the lookout platform. "The palms!" he shouted. "They're climbing the palms!" He raised his rifle, but those were his last words. A volley rang out, and he fell. Bullets were now striking the inner face of the wall against which I stood. Arab marksmen had climbed to the top of the palms on the other side of the fort, and were firing down upon the roof. Then, from all the sand hills, the fire broke out again. "Rapid fire at the palms," shouted Lejeune. "Bring those birds down from their trees. Brant, up to the lookout platform, quick!" I glanced round as I charged my magazine afresh. Brant looked at the platform, and then at Lejeune. Lejeune's hand went to his revolver. Brant climbed the ladder and started firing as quickly as he could work his rifle. Michael was still on his feet, but as I turned back I saw his neighbor spin and crash down, clutching both hands at his streaming throat. Soon afterwards I heard a shout from above and saw Brant stagger backward on the high platform. He struck the railing, toppled over, and crashed to the roof. "Find a good place for that carrion, Sergeant Dupre," shouted Lejeune. "Make him ornamental, if he can't be useful. Then, up you go, Colonna." Schwartz, Brant, Colonna. Doubtless the next would be Delaray or Vogue. Then Gatto, Bolodar, Presumably he hoped to keep Sant Andre, Corridor, Maris, Michael, and me alive until all the mutineers and diamond stealers were dead. My head ached with eye strain and heat stroke. Every explosion of my rifle was like a blow on the head with a hammer. I had almost come to the end of my tether when once again the Arab fire slackened and died. On the sound of the ceasefire bugle, I strained up and looked round. Michael was all right, but a good half of the garrison was dead or dying. Among the dead were both Sergeant Dupre and Corporal Boldini. Both had been struck up to simulate living men. Colonna must be dead too, for Delary had been sent up to the platform and was lying flat behind a little pile of bodies. Saint Andre take rank as corporal, said Lejeune. All survivors go below for soup and coffee. Leaving the embrasures to be manned by the dead, we obeyed. Only Lejeune never left the roof, but had soup, coffee, and wine brought up to him. Poor Corridor had spoken truly as concerned his own fate, for he remained at his post, staring with dead eyes across the desert. Maris was dead too. Only 3 were left, Saint Andre, Michael, and myself, upon whom Lejeune could rely if the Arabs now abandoned their siege. But this the Arabs did not do, leaving a circle of their best marksmen to pick off any defenders of the fort who showed themselves. The bulk of them retired behind the oasis. Later Lejeune sent Vogue to join the bodies of his fellow conspirators, Schwartz, Colonna, and Delary, on the lookout. Then, except for a crouching sentry in the middle of each wall, those who returned from below sat with their backs to the wall beside their embrasures. The Arab sharpshooters did not harm and wasted their ammunition on dead men. And so evening came and the moon rose. We had permission to sleep while 2 sentries patrolled each wall and was changed every 2 hours. Up with him, growled Lejeune, speaking of Schwartz's body. I'll allot you corpses the place next to his, and stick your pipe between your teeth. You are fond of pipe, Vogue. Help you to think about plots, Up with him, you dog. He then sent Vogue back to the lookout platform to be a moonlight target for the Trugs. I had a talk with Michael when we were both below. Looks like a thin time tomorrow, he said. If they pot a few of us and then rush, they should get in. If we can stand them off tomorrow, the relief from Tuckatoo ought to roll up next morning, I said. If either of those Gomes got away and played the game, agreed Michael. They may have been pinched, though. Anyway, the relief will find a thin house there. Which reminds me of it. If I take the knock and you don't, I want you to do something for me. You can rely on me, Beau. There are some letters in my belt, a public letter, a letter for Claudia, one for you and one for Digby. And there's a letter and a tiny packet for Aunt Patricia. If you possibly can, sometime get that letter and packet to Aunt. Especially the letter. The packet doesn't much matter. It contains nothing of value. But I'll die more comfortably if I knew Aunt was going to get that letter. Oh, shut it, Beau, I said roughly. Your number's not up yet. Don't talk rot. I'm only asking you to do something if I'm pipped. I'll do it if I'm alive, I replied. But suppose we're both killed. They're addressed and stamped, and it's usual to forward such things found on dead soldiers. Depends on what happens. If we die and Lejeune survives, I doubt they're being dispatched. And if the Arabs get it, there's not much chance of anything surviving. But if we're both killed, and the relief gets in before the Arabs do, the officer in charge would do the usual thing. We can only hope for the best, he added. Anything I can do for you, if it's the other way round, John? Well, love to Dig, and there's a letter for Isabel. You might write to her if ever you get back to civilization and say we babbled of her and sang, just before the battle, mother, and all that. Michael grinned. I'll say the right things about you to Isabel, old son. But if otherwise, be sure Aunt gets my letter. We will continue this story next Friday or Saturday. Looks like we have about 2 episodes left on this book. And thanks for listening to Miss Retro Reads.